Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us at Zidul Galben live podcast. So we'll do this episode in English because we have a special guest today. It's Lars Pollmann. Hello, Lars. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So as I mentioned to you guys in the previous days, Lars so I've been watching Lars and listening to him actually for a long time at the yellowwallpod. It's a podcast in English which is hosted by himself and also Stefan Bucko and Matthias Suk. So I recommend you guys check it out whenever you have time. They're mainly doing, I would say, pre-match previews, right, Lars? And also talking about some other topics surrounding BVB.
Previews, post-match analysis, if you want to call it that, transfer analysis, and everything else around Borussia Dortmund. Yeah, 529 episodes as of yesterday. So if anyone wants to go to the back catalog, you have a year's worth of Dortmund content to listen to, I guess.
Yeah. So I think I've been listening to the yellowwallpod since, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, something like that. Apart from your involvement in that podcast, I also know that you're a sports journalist and also a book author about. So you've written a book about Borussia Dortmund, right?
Yeah, and with all the little tidbits and info that nobody needs. That was basically the premise of the book. So it's mostly for Christmas presents, maybe a birthday gift, something like that. Unfortunately, only in German, so most of your listeners or viewers will not be able to read it, but they should obviously buy it anyway.
Yeah, so maybe we'll drop a link afterwards so they check it out. I looked on it. I looked on the internet and I saw there's like a digital version and also like a physical one, right? That they can buy.
I guess so. I only wrote the book. I'm not involved in distributing and whatsoever.
Okay.
I was paid, and that's basically it. But nobody needs to, go out and buy the book because it's already a kind of out of date. Because it's I wrote it before the game against Mainz, for example, in 2023. So it doesn't have that. Maybe fortunately so, it doesn't have the Champions League final. They lost against Real Madrid. Another fortunate set of events, I guess. So, no, it's all good.
Yeah. So I believe you also live in Dortmund or close to Dortmund, right?
I moved to Dortmund for work last year in July. And then a week before Christmas, I was fired. So I'm currently a free agent, if you will. But I still obviously follow Dortmund very closely. And living in the city has given me a new appreciation also for how much or how important the club really is for all these people in the city. I used to live in the Rhineland, so for people who don't really know German geography, that's like an hour and a half drive southwards, I guess, from Dortmund. So I never really got the intensity of feeling that Dortmunders have for the club, which is really something special.
Well, we'll try to pick your brain as much as possible about, let's say, evergreen topics surrounding Borussia Dortmund, because I think people would like to have more insight from someone who lives close to Dortmund and whose career is partially tied to Borussia Dortmund. So we can start with the match against Atalanta and then move on to the more general topics. And also, I'd encourage our listeners to drop in as many questions as they like, and I'll try to manage as many of them and to address them during the podcast. So I'll show these comments here, but we can pick them up maybe later on in the second half of the podcast. So strictly regarding the double leg against Atalanta, are you confident after what you saw that we'll manage to pull through and maybe then get eliminated by Bayern Munich or Arsenal from the competition?
I mean, maybe starting with the second part, I'm definitely quite confident that Dortmund aren't able to beat either Bayern or Arsenal over 180 minutes. Regarding Atalanta, I was pretty confident before the game on this week, because I watch Serie A quite a bit because I also follow Inter. So I'm aware of Atalanta's season so far, and they haven't really had the most consistent off seasons. They are also involved in a race for Europe, let's say, in Serie A. So I was wondering how much focus and effort they would put into the Champions League, especially the first leg being in Dortmund probably helped them more than you usually think of. Usually you think having the second leg at home is more of an advantage, but in this case it might not have been. So I was fairly confident before the game, and then obviously, especially the first half, was bordering on perfect, I would say, from Dortmund, scoring 2 goals. I think not adding a third in the second half, a couple of chances going awry, and also I think the most glaring one was when Kane Chukwuemeka just didn't see Karim Adeyemi, who would have been through on goal. There's a little voice in my head wondering whether they will come to rue that, but there's also like the more logical version of myself thinking that Atalanta might not even put too much of an effort in for the second leg, just because it's very hard to overturn a 2-goal deficit. And then, as you already mentioned, it's Arsenal or Bayern in the next round. So outside of monetary reasons, I don't know how much there is to gain for Atalanta when they, as I mentioned before, have this Serie A race for Europe, and I think they are in the semifinals of the Coppa Italia as well. So maybe smooth sailing for Dortmund next week. But as we all know, Dortmund don't really do smooth sailing.
Yeah, that's true. Assuming that we would go past Atalanta, do you have any preferences for the round of 16? I mean, I saw that Arsenal are losing a little bit of steam right now. They had two draws, I believe, recently.
They drew against Wolves yesterday. I would always choose the not Bayern option, just because the media in Germany will be insufferable for weeks on end if Dortmund face Bayern in the Champions League on top of the game next week in the Bundesliga. So I'm always going to say the other team. And as you mentioned, Arsenal, maybe not at the same level as they were in, let's say, autumn, for example, when they beat Bayern in the Champions League stage. So I guess I would say Arsenal, but obviously Dortmund wouldn't be favored in either of those two matchups.
Yeah, that's true. Although I saw like a recent statement from Anton, who said that they never feel like they're unable to win matches. So there's like this good, let's say, morale right now within the team. So who knows? I mean, we wouldn't be huge underdogs, I believe, in either case. Although I noticed like the one match where we were clearly outmatched this season, I mean, out of the most recent ones, I believe was against Tottenham Hotspur, and I felt like the intensity of Premier League was on a different level because the Spurs weren't particularly good, let's say, during this season. So maybe it was just the intensity that let's say league brings. Maybe Borussia Dortmund cannot handle British clubs right now. I'm not sure, but that was my feeling when I watched that match. But on the other side, I would agree that probably Arsenal are better choice for us, assuming we go through.
The thing with Arsenal, on the other hand, is that they are, I think, sort of a better version of what Dortmund are doing this season, or especially in the last few weeks. So very solid defensively, and then score of set pieces quite a bit. And even the tactics at set pieces are quite the same, because obviously Arsenal have kind of been the first team to really crowd the goalkeeper and make it difficult for him. And that's how Dortmund have operated since the winter break, which is still funny to think about, I think, since they let go of their set-piece specialist head coach, and they've gotten so much better attacking set pieces. They've also gotten a little worse defending them, I would say. And it's kind of like Arsenal are doing pretty much the same things at Dortmund, just at a higher level with, better individual players. But at the end of the day, I would actually agree with Waldemar Anton that Dortmund wouldn't be, without a shot at either of those games, because the run of results they've shown since the turn of the year has been really impressive. And the one thing we can say for a Niko Kovac team, they will always be prepared physically. They will not be blown out, even though they've conceded quite a few goals in the Champions League this season, but usually they are tight at the back. So I'm guessing they wouldn't be huge underdogs, and it would be like a 1 or 2 goal difference over the 2 legs of a round of 16 match up.
I see. I'd like to move on a little bit to the Bundesliga, and there's like a debate between us in the fan club regarding the battle for the title. So, do you believe that we are right now in a battle with Bayern Munich to become champions of Germany, or not really? I mean, it's 6 points. Actually, you could say it's 7 points that we need to get back from them, and there's a direct match that's coming up pretty soon. But does it feel like a title race right now in Germany, or not really, simply because Bayern are winning like by 3 or 4 goals usually, and Dortmund kind of struggles to win by 1 or 2 goals?
I would actually say it feels more like a title race than I believe it is, if that makes sense. I think given that Dortmund have won all but 1 games in the Bundesliga since the new year, and that game was the 3-3 draw against Frankfurt, whereas Bayern lost against Augsburg. They dropped points. Who did they drop points against recently? Mainz was before the winter break. There was another game they didn't win. I don't remember which one it was.
Yeah, I need to check.
So it kind of feels like momentum is with Dortmund, but I personally don't think there's a real title race going on, because, as you already mentioned, it's basically 7 points, because even if Dortmund and Bayern were to end up equal on points, the goal difference will not be able to, or Dortmund won't be able to, equalize in that part. So at the end of the day, it basically means if Dortmund win all remaining games, Bayern would have not only to lose against Dortmund, obviously, with the direct matchup coming up, but they would also need to drop points in 2 more games. So that means, if my math is correct, there's 12 match days left. So Bayern would have to not win a quarter of the matches in the Bundesliga to the end of the season. That doesn't seem altogether likely to me. So I think Dortmund will end up with a historically good second place season, and that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. I think Dortmund this season definitely deserve to be in the title race, but Bayern have kind of moved the goalposts over the last decade and a bit more, so that unless they completely crap the bed like they did in the season that Leverkusen won the title, you basically have to pulverize your records and have an absolutely historical season to beat Bayern these days. And sadly, there were a few too many draws in the first half of the season for Dortmund to have, in my opinion, at least a realistic shot at the title.
Yeah, there's been a few chances to do that. Like, Leverkusen managed to take advantage of this. We've had like 2 chances in the past 8 years, I believe, with Lucien Favre and then again with Edin Terzic. So we botched both of them. So I'm one. But in both cases, I believe we've been ahead of them in the table for a long time. So it's pretty hard to imagine how we'll manage to, let's say, recuperate a difference of 7 points. Basically, I don't think that's ever happened.
I mean, not to Bayern, I don't think. Maybe to other clubs, because
to us, yes.
Yeah, as you already, I'm pretty sure Schalke have managed to do that as well, and Leverkusen maybe in the past. But I mean, there's one thing to be said. I think when Dortmund were champions in 2002, they came back from quite a deficit, and their then manager, so more like sporting director than head coach, was Michael Mayer. Maybe some of your older members will remember him. And he said that season that the hunter always wins in a hunt. So, I mean, if we want to stay with that, then Dortmund are the hunters and Bayern are the hunted. And maybe the hunter gets lucky again. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I feel like each wrong step permanently gets us out of the title race right now. And there's a pretty tough match ahead of us with Leipzig. But yeah, before we get to Leipzig, maybe we'll talk about some of those evergreen topics. So one of them is about the chemistry between Niko Kovac and Borussia Dortmund. I remember we made a poll on our WhatsApp group to see who our members wanted as a Borussia Dortmund coach when it was clear that Nuri Sahin wasn't going to be the one. And we've had like I don't remember all the options, but it was like 6 or 7 options. Niko Kovac was the only one who did not get one single vote. So here we are 1 year later with him doing a pretty good job, but there's still some discussions, at least within our fan club, regarding the fact that maybe he's not him as a person, but his playing style doesn't quite fit the DNA of Borussia Dortmund, because he's brought structure to the team and to the gameplay and results, of course, which were the most important ones back when he signed with Borussia Dortmund. But he has this reputation of, let's say, going down pretty heavily down with some of his teams after maybe 1 year. So we don't know what to expect going forward. Maybe history won't repeat itself with Niko Kovac and Borussia Dortmund. And also on the other side, in terms of football DNA, we're not playing very attractive football. So in most matches, it can be a little bit boring to watch Borussia Dortmund. And I'm wondering if it's because of Niko Kovac, maybe it's a little bit more due to the fact that the squad doesn't allow him to play very spectacular football, because we don't have like an Erling Haaland, not just in terms of, let's say, dribbles, but also in terms of charisma, So we don't have these types of superstars like Jude Bellingham or Haaland or Dembele, like we used to have Marco Reus back in the day. So what do you think about the way Niko Kovac fits with Borussia Dortmund in terms of, let's say, identity and also efficiency?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't have voted for Niko Kovac in your poll either. I remember when it was announced and we did our episode of the yellowwallpod, I maybe not a verbatim quote, but basically I said I have the lowest of regards for Niko Kovac as a head coach, because I remember how he flaked out at Bayern and Wolfsburg. Remember his football not being overly interesting to watch, and also he kind of cultivated a somewhat difficult persona, if that makes sense. So he for example, when he had problems with Thomas Müller, of all people, at Bayern, with Max Kruse at Wolfsburg, obviously he's a bit of a wildcard personality-wise. So I can understand completely that everyone was skeptical, because I was as well. And I can also understand to an extent that some people remain skeptical to this day, because, as you mentioned, what he stands for in terms of his coaching style, the football his teams play, or used to play anyway, doesn't necessarily mesh with what Dortmund tend to like to be and to do. So, attacking football, rather winning games 4-3 than 1-0, it seems. also maybe not integrating talent enough. And that's certainly a point of criticism that has been leveled at Niko Kovac this season, despite all the relative success or, good results, however one wants to put it. But I think at least my personal view has changed quite a bit. Maybe it's because during the first half of this season, I went to the games, I went to press conferences, I talked to him. He's a very charming person in person. He's much more engaging with the media than he used to be. I think he kind of learned his lesson from being not approachable at Bayern and Wolfsburg, at least a little bit. Kind of changed how he views his interaction with us in the media. So maybe I'm biased personally towards him, but I have definitely grown to like him much more than I thought was possible. And I would also push back a little bit on the narrative that has been put out there quite a bit, that Dortmund are boring this season. First of all, I would like them to be boring, because that's what I've been saying for years now, that they need to be more boring, getting results done, just edging out result after result, because that kind of is like one domino making the other fall. And we can see it right now. I think there's a level of confidence and belief in the team that comes from results. And results come from being boring sometimes, because when Dortmund are the team that pays their players a lot more money than everyone in the league but Bayern, they should be the second best team in terms of results and all that. But then, especially after the turn of the year, when we look at the results in the Bundesliga, they've played 7 games, 6 wins, 1 draw against Frankfurt. And in all but one of those matches, they scored 3 goals. And in the one they didn't, they scored 2, but then they scored 4 against Mainz. So the average still 3 goals in over 7 games. So a fairly decent sample size anyway. So I would kind of challenge the idea that Dortmund have been boring, at least since the turn of the year. And as I said, I like boring sometimes. I think Dortmund have had too much excitement over the last few years, too much turnover at the coaching position as well. And that is maybe the main reason why I don't understand how, when Dortmund are having these kinds of results, that people are talking about, yeah, okay, but Niko Kovac, he certainly isn't the long-term solution. He may well not be, but I think he's definitely deserved quite a bit of leeway. And I'm quite confident that they will soon talk about another contract extension, when the last contract extension was kind of viewed with maybe mixed feelings by most fans.
I see. Yeah, maybe boring is a lazy way of putting it. I think maybe let's say, concern from some of the fans is that the play is not as aesthetically pleasing as it used to be like 5 years ago, something like that. And maybe it's just down to the lack of quality, because we have a pretty balanced squad, I believe. But there's no standout player. Like, we thought maybe Karim Adeyemi would be that guy, but he's not. He's like a rotation player right now, I believe. And but yeah, there's no one person standing out. Maybe a little bit at Mecha, but only because he's very consistent with his play. Other than that, they're all like decent guys with certain limits, and nobody's going to like explode and be the next Dembele or Lewandowski or Marco Reus.
I think there's certainly an argument to be made there. I think quality-wise, or maybe let's look at it from another perspective. If you asked, or if you did a poll, who's currently the best Dortmund player, most people would probably go with Schlotterbeck, and then maybe Gregor Kobel if we want to include goalkeepers. So the 2 best players at Dortmund may well be a center half and a goalkeeper, which that inherently isn't the most exciting thing. Obviously, it's very valuable to have these players, but it's more exciting to have a 20-year-old midfielder who's turning into a superstar like Bellingham was, and his brother isn't so far. It's more exciting to have a young striker coming through the ranks, and they don't have that. But at the end of the day, they currently have a team that works really well. They are playing their second best ever season. I mean, I think that sometimes gets forgotten, because Bayern are ahead by 6 points, and as you mentioned, the level of excitement isn't always there with Dortmund, but they are having the second best ever season this club has had. So I don't know that we can be too critical of their squad building approach, for example, but at the end of the day, we are all football fans and we want to be excited by the games they play and not just the results. So I can understand that there's sometimes a level of frustration, but to me, results is ultimately still what matters more.
Yeah, I get it, and I agree. So I'm not part of the category who is criticizing Kovac for doing too little in order to make the games exciting. So I'm perfectly content with what he's doing right now with the team. But since you mentioned some details about the way the squad has been built, and you also mentioned Nico Schlotterbeck as one of the, let's say, most valuable players and the best players in the team. I'm curious how you perceive this saga of contract extension with Nico Schlotterbeck. We tend to be a bit more emotional, so we got pretty angry with him recently simply because as supporters we saw him as the future leader of the team. So the guy who wears the armband, the guy who leads, like the way Mats Hummels used to be before he went to Bayern Munich. So that's who we were expecting Nico Schlotterbeck to become, and he can make a mistake from time to time on the field. It's fine as long as he has that leadership attitude. But when you, let's say, extend these discussions over I don't know how many months, maybe it's because we don't know when they actually started talking, but it's been several months, and then they keep rolling over and over in the media, it becomes frustrating because it's not really the way you would expect a leader to act. On the other hand, I know that he's a football player. He has a career, a limited time span to play, and maybe he just wants trophies or maybe he just wants more money. So we can understand this from a professional perspective. But as fans, it becomes frustrating to us that specifically the one guy who we thought of as a leader, I mean, there's two guys, it's him and Gregor Kobel, but we have expectations from these two guys to not make like a circus or a saga out of a contract extension. And Gregor Kobel didn't do that. I mean, there were some discussions of him maybe leaving at some point before he signed the extension, but it was not like a never-ending story like the contract of Nico. What do you think about this?
I can understand everything you said. I would just say that I don't know that Nico Schlotterbeck himself has turned this into a circus, because his messaging has actually been fairly consistent. He's always said he hasn't made a decision, and he's set himself a deadline, and before then there's going to be a decision, but he's never alluded to making a decision in December and then pushing that back to February, March, or whatever. So he hasn't given a promise that he then didn't keep, for example. So I think it's mostly media talk because he's the most interesting personality at Dortmund. He's probably the one player that people can imagine signing for, Bayern, Real Madrid, or whatever. I don't know who else has that level of, star power and quality. And I think it's a bit unfair towards him, maybe, to blame him for this saga, as you called it, but it is a saga. I mean, I remember a press conference he gave a week or two after his return from injury, and he was asked, when are you going to announce your extension? He wasn't asked, when are you going to decide, but when it's like it was considered to be a sort of a done deal for a long time. And then I think gradually people became aware that it's not a done deal at all that he's saying, because he turned 26 in December. He hasn't won anything in his career. He lost a cup final with Freiburg. He lost the Bundesliga title on the last match day with Dortmund. He lost the Champions League final with Dortmund. I think it would be perfectly understandable for him to at least keep his options available to him. I think there might be some movement now that Upamecano has extended at Bayern, because that was one of the obvious points of interest for him to go to, because I think what a lot of people don't realize or don't remember is that Nico Schlotterbeck, before he signed for Dortmund, did an interview in Germany, and he was asked about, his career plans and whatever. And he said he wasn't one of the guys who definitely needs to go abroad at any point in his career. He wants to be in the Bundesliga. That was always his dream. But he wants to go to the best club in the Bundesliga. And unfortunately for all of us, that isn't Borussia Dortmund. So my personal view on the thing has changed quite a bit. I mean, like most people, I thought he's going to extend because he loves it here and he's the next captain and all that. Then when it didn't happen for months, I was starting to get worried maybe, that there were other options that he might prefer. And now that the Bayern opportunities seems to have slipped, because I can't see him going there when they already have Upamecano and Kim and Jonathan Tah. I mean, he's not going to go somewhere where he doesn't play or doesn't have a guaranteed starting spot, unless it's like a Real Madrid once in a lifetime offer. If that comes, who knows? But as of right now, I think the most likely option is that he's going to extend, but with a release clause, so he can maybe keep his options available for 27, 28 or whenever in the future. But I'm fairly optimistic now that a resolution is coming, maybe in the international break in March.
I see. Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm a bit reluctant, simply because if you feel very comfortable at a club which is offering you a substantial pay raise and clarity within, let's say, your role at the club, you should be able to make that decision a little bit more quickly if you're really, really into it. So maybe it's just him actually weighing his options right now, but not feeling very confident in Borussia Dortmund's offer since it's taking so long.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously it, because if he did feel strongly, he would have just signed the thing, because I don't think there's any negotiating left to do. I'm pretty sure he has a contract in front of him that the club would be happy with him signing, right now as we speak. But he's obviously not feeling as strongly about that. Maybe it's just, looking to see what's out there. And that's also fair enough. Like, as you already mentioned, these guys have careers of a very defined short time and need to do the most with it. And like, if he signs a contract now and then an hour later Real Madrid are calling because they want to make him the face of the defense, like, who could begrudge him signing for Real Madrid in that instance? So I can understand every player who needs some time, but again, I'm as of right now, pretty confident that he's going to extend. But as I said before, my feelings have flip-flopped, so they might do again.
Yeah, one topic of interest for the media in the past few weeks regarding Nico Schlotterbeck was, I don't know if it was like a real topic within the club, but media liked to write about this. It was about the way he positions himself regarding trophy ambitions. So he seems like an ambitious guy. He wants trophies, and he publicly stated a few times that he wants to win trophies and to win the Bundesliga, to become a champion. And I know there's been like the management always tends to let's say calm things down and say, hey, come on, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Even Niko Kovac did that sometimes, but we repeatedly see this from Kel, from Riken, that we don't really talk specifically about winning the Bundesliga or winning the DFB Pokal. I think maybe once or twice in the past 5 years, I've heard them say clearly. I mean, I think I heard Vasquez say this a couple of times, like, yeah, we're pushing for a trophy this season. But this very rarely happens to be like an explicit demand from public demand from the management side. So for us being, let's say, foreign fans, international fans, we're like 2,000 kilometers away from Dortmund, and we only get to watch Borussia play live in front of us once or twice per season. It's a bit frustrating, and I think everyone wants trophies, but we at least feel the need to see more commitment towards trophies or title aspirations from the management. That isn't really happening, and I'm wondering if the German fans and you as well are content with the way that the management is positioning towards themselves, towards titles or not, and title aspirations, or just maybe you just think that they're being realistic and we're getting ahead of ourselves by talking about winning trophies, when the reality is that we're not really doing that in the past few years?
First of all, I'm in the minority on this, and I appreciate that I'm in the minority, but I have no problem whatsoever with the management stance, Kehl, Ricken, Kowal, Schwatzke. I don't think the team wins one additional game if they say, hey, we want to challenge Bayern for the trophy, or we are going to win the league this year despite our 6-point difference to Bayern. I can understand completely that it doesn't make sense for them, because it doesn't change the on-field product, and the only thing it does change is the level of expectations that is leveled towards them. And then if Dortmund somewhat inevitably don't win the title, the German media will turn around and slap it across their faces and say, hey, you declared you wanted to win the title, you didn't do it, so what went wrong? When nothing necessarily has went wrong. It's just that FC Bayern are an order of magnitude above Dortmund in pretty much every regard. So unless, as we said earlier, Bayern completely screw up a season, they cannot be beaten. And but I can also understand, obviously, that fans have a different point of view and would like more commitment, as you called it. I think it's the most important thing isn't what is uttered in front of the media. I can, from experience now, tell you that anything said immediately after the game can basically be wiped away, because it doesn't make any difference. They are coming out of the dressing room, they are still sweating, haven't showered, and are asked somewhat stupid questions by us journalists, because we have our own deadlines and bylines to produce and stuff. So the most important thing is obviously how they feel about it inside the dressing room, and how they approach games. For example, how they approach the games now against Leipzig and Bayern, which is obviously a huge opportunity to cement themselves as a title aspirant, because if they beat Leipzig away from home for the first time in, I don't even know, 5 years, 6 years, that is a statement of intent, much more important than anything you can say in the media. And then obviously, if they beat Bayern and reduce the deficit to 3 points, or perhaps it's they are level on points, who knows what Bayern do on the weekend, that is always more important than things that are said in the media. And they already know this from experience also, because I remember very well when Hans-Joachim Watzke was elected as club president in November in the Westfalenhalle right next to the stadium. Lars Ricken, in his speech as the management director for football, he talked about the cup game against Leverkusen, and that he expects a win as a present to Hans-Joachim Watzke. And wouldn't it be nice if Hans-Joachim Watzke's first title as a president came this year in the cup? And we all know that they went out against Leverkusen, and everyone immediately turned around and said, hey, Lars Ricken, you stupid man, why did you talk about the cup win as if you were not going to be eliminated by Leverkusen? So I think it doesn't make sense for them to raise the level of expectations against this FC Bayern. So I can completely understand basically both sides of the coin. So I'm sitting comfortably on the fence.
But so in terms of, let's say, verbalizing your title aspirations, I get your point, and I agree. But on the other hand, do you feel like maybe the club hasn't been led in terms of management style in such a way that we can be a little bit more ambitious towards winning titles, or not? I mean, could we have done more to win titles in terms of how the club was managed, like maybe more ambitious transfers, more, let's say, competent decisions regarding mainly transfers, but also maybe, of course, getting sponsors and money to attracting money to the club, so we can pump more into performance? I don't know, is the club being led as best as it can be led given the circumstances, or have we, let's say, maybe missed some opportunities over there?
I'm certain they have missed opportunities because that's like human. I'm pretty sure FC Bayern have also missed opportunities in every regard over the last decade and more. They come from a higher level, so mistakes, if we want to call them, that aren't as important, let's say. I mean, Dortmund were one goal away from winning the league in 23, and they were in the Champions League final against Real Madrid and were the better side for 60 minutes, but didn't win that. So those are just two games which could completely have changed our view of this club and this management structure and all of that. So at the end of the day, it's football. It's a low-scoring game, and I don't know if I can swear on this, but shit happens.
You can, yeah.
Okay. So, like, the thing I think we can obviously debate, like, squad building, decision making over the years. They've, as we already mentioned, they don't have, you know, that one exciting talent that we can all assume is going to leave for 100 million euros next season to Barcelona or whatever. But I would actually lay more blame on, you know, the coaching quagmire. I think they have missed quite a bit, and certainly the decision to go with Nuri Sahin, who had no relevant experience, I would say, because obviously he was like the main manager in Turkey, but I don't care about Super League. I don't know about you guys, but and it wasn't Fenerbahce or Besiktas or Galatasaray. It was a small club in Turkey, so it's not relevant for leading Borussia Dortmund. I think the decision makers got maybe enamored with the idea of a boy from Dortmund leading the club, but they basically had that with Edin Terzic, and I think they made a couple of decisions in terms of coaching, like even going with Terzic himself after the Marco Rose experience. Maybe if they had an immediate answer for the post-Lucien Favre era, if we want to call it that, maybe they would have won the title instead of Leverkusen. But I mean, who's to say? It's at the end of the day, it's still football, and as I said, shit happens.
There were some questionable decisions regarding coaches in the past few years. I mean, you wouldn't say that Marco Rose. I mean, nobody really liked him from our community. But it wasn't like he fumbled the bag terribly and it was like a foregone conclusion that he's going to get sacked. Yet they decided that he wasn't a good fit and said goodbye.
But to be honest, that was more initiated by him because he didn't feel, you know, the full confidence of the club. So obviously at the end, they made the decision to go in another direction, but he kind of initiated that process himself.
Yeah, but my understanding was that he didn't even like make specific plans to move to Dortmund and to stay there with his family or anything. I mean, he wasn't preparing for like a long-term stay. That was the feeling that I got back in the day. Anyway, I'm not trying to blame him necessarily, but it was a bit weird. And then with Edin Terzic, I mean, of course, different circumstances, but it wasn't like a foregone conclusion for him to get sacked either. So it was a bit weird set of choices in terms of hiring coaches and then letting them go, and then only to bring other guys who are maybe a bit questionable to replace them.
Yeah, I think there was no real long-term plan. Like, as I said, Lucien Favre had to go. I mean, I remember very vividly that home game to Stuttgart. That was no longer a tenable situation. But basically, since then, there hasn't been a real plan, in my opinion. Obviously, going with Marco Rose, who at the time was the highest regarded young manager in Germany, that made all the sense in the world. But that didn't work out for many different reasons. I mean, if we remember the Europa League campaign, how that ended, that definitely wasn't pretty. And but then going back to Edin Terzic, who had done well as a caretaker, obviously won the cup. I don't know. I think the Şahin one is the one that sticks in my mind, because there was no reason to give the job to someone with no relevant experience. It wasn't like, Leverkusen were going for him, or any other big club were chomping at the bits to get Nuri Şahin at, I don't know how old he was, 37, 38. So it would have been wise, in my opinion, to let him, earn his spurs somewhere else, maybe in the Dutch league or maybe in Turkey, and come back, as a 41, 42-year-old who's been fired maybe once or twice, who's maybe won in a smaller league and gotten more experience, because I think most of our listeners or viewers will know that Borussia Dortmund are not an easy club to manage. A lot of expectations, the weight of 80,000 fans every home game, and he just wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking about management decisions, I'd like to switch over to the next topic, which is about the management. So there's been some changes in the past couple of years. So we've seen Lars Ricken become sports CEO or CEO of sports, something like that. We've seen Carsten Kramer become the head of the club basically right now. Sebastian Kehl has been around in his position for, I don't know, maybe 4 years, something similar. And also Watzke stepped down, but is more like overseeing everything right now from the role of president. So he's not like in an executive position, but maybe more like on a strategic position right now. So given all these changes, and also Sven Mislintat left, it's been a weird situation with him back in the day. But right now, looking at this leadership structure, how confident do you feel like we have like the right people to do the jobs? Is it just a thing of letting them get their let's say feet wet and figure out what they need to do because they're competent enough? They just need to gain some more experience, like it was the case with Michael Zorc, which my understanding is, I didn't follow the club so closely back then, but right when he came as a sporting director, my feeling is that he didn't do a particularly good job, and then he got better and better at it as time went on. So is this the case for the current leadership team, or is it too early to tell, or do you just think that they're maybe not the best fit for Borussia Dortmund leadership?
I think you have to look at them basically case by case, because obviously it's very different roles. Yeah, I mean, Hans-Joachim Watzke as the president is basically out of the picture, I would say, even in terms of, strategic long-term planning. I'm sure he's a sounding board for especially Lars Ricken, who's basically one of his confidants, if you want to call it that. But Watzke is no longer really involved in any sort of decision-making processes. Carsten Kramer, you probably know him better than me, as we talked about before we started this episode. I can basically not judge him because I have no real clue about how finance works and sponsorships and all that. I can see large numbers, and if people tell me large numbers are good, then I say, hey, okay, he's doing a good job. I don't know. Lars Ricken, I've actually interviewed him many years ago. He was my favorite player when I was a boy, because obviously we share a first name and we also have the same birthday, but he's 13 years older than me. I think he definitely falls into the category of still needing to get his feet wet, as you called it. I don't know that he has the gravitas and the personality and charisma as of right now to be a strong voice for Borussia Dortmund in a challenging media landscape. I think some of his interviews, he just doesn't have much of a profile, I would say, as of right now. I think he needs to grow into that, even though he's not a young guy anymore, obviously, but he's still relatively new in his role. And you could argue he's made a number of good decisions already. For example, realizing that the experiment with Nuri Şahin wasn't working, and he was the one pushing to sign Niko Kovac, which, as we know now, is at least short-term was a good decision, even though there was a lot of criticism for that. So I think the jury on him is still out. I think Sebastian Kehl is probably the most criticized man whenever it comes to Borussia Dortmund, and I have somewhat of a, I don't know, it's a challenging evaluation for me because in a vacuum, I can agree with basically every single transfer they've made under Sebastian Kehl. Every time they sign someone and I look into it, I think, yeah, that's a good idea. I probably would have done that also. But then you look at the totality of the work, and the squad isn't built in a way that excites us, isn't built in a way that guarantees a lot of future income in terms of transfer values. There are quite a few holes in the squad as well. If you want to look at some positions like defensive midfield, there isn't an international class number 6 or defensive midfielder as of right now. There are no wingers left because Niko Kovac doesn't like to play wingers. So I can understand, the frustration with Sebastian Kehl's body of work. I think they could probably improve upon in that position of sporting director, but it's also a bit of a strange construct because at most clubs, the sporting director wouldn't have as much power as he has when they also have a CEO of football or sport in Lars Ricken. So it's not streamlined necessarily. I think that was also definitely the problem when there was also Sven Mislintat involved, because nobody really knew what the roles were. It's better. It's gotten better since Mislintat is left, because now it's only 2 people making most decisions. But I think there's still room for improvement. And given that Sebastian Kehl has been involved for quite a number of years now, I think it's not prudent to expect that improvement coming from him.
Yeah, but maybe you can give us a little bit more insight on how squad building actually works at Borussia Dortmund, because we're not familiar with this stuff. So we have Sebastian Kehl as sporting director. We have Lars Ricken as CEO of sport. And there's also around there, I don't know how much of an influence he still has. There's also Matthias Zammer as an external consultant. So how do things work? Does, let's say, Lars Ricken give like the large overview? We need these types of players, and Kehl starts going and looking around and starts working on offers and contacting clubs and agents and so on? Or is, let's say, Kehl able to make more strategic decisions, like after talking to the coach, maybe he can by himself make up that we need this type of player, this profile or that profile? How does the dynamic work between these guys who are responsible of building the squad?
If only I knew. It's not common knowledge, let's say. So it's not like anybody could really give you an informed answer. I think there are some things we can infer. I think Lars Ricken probably gives more of a broad strategic overview. This is what we want our squad to be or to represent, or we want to have these qualities. So let's say we want fast young players we can sell in future transfer windows for profit, which basically every club does, but obviously someone still needs to say it. And Sebastian Kehl is more like the executive organ, if that makes sense. So he conducts basically negotiations for the most part with other clubs, with players. He is the contact person for the scouting network. Obviously, there's scouts, and then there's the chief scout or head of scouting, or however that is currently named at Dortmund, because they seem to be changing that stuff around quite a bit. That was obviously also for a brief period of time the role of Sven Mislintat as the technical director, which every club also kind of defines for themselves. It's not like a set position in German football. So to make a long story short, nobody really knows how it works. I think there's probably quite a large input these days from the head coach because squad building has become more short term because players spend less time at one club before moving again. And we can basically see the impact of Niko Kovac, for example, because as I mentioned before, he doesn't really play with attacking wingers, let's say. So they got rid of Jamie Bino-Gittens last summer. They let Duranville go because he didn't play any minutes. They let go of Campbell, who's also more of an attacking winger than anything else. And instead, they've, for example, gone with quite a bit of investment at centre back in terms, at least, of numbers. Obviously, now everybody's injured, but they went out and got a number of centre halves. The interesting part is obviously that you also you always have to manage not only the short term but the long term. And then the news today came out that they signed Kawa. I'm going to go with Prach because I don't know how Brazilian names work, but it might be Kawa Prates or Prats or however it's pronounced. But he's obviously the second teenager they signed for the summer after Justin Lerma. So those are two long-term projects, I guess, in which Niko Kovac will not have been involved too much because chances are those two guys are only going to come into their own with the next head coach or the one after that, because that's how football works these days.
Yeah, and I think Justin Lerma was signed maybe even before Niko Kovac joined Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, definitely. He was signed when he was 16 years old, and obviously him being from he's from Ecuador, I think. He can only move to Europe after his 18th birthday, so that has been. It might have been under Edin Terzic, actually. It might even have been before Nuri Sahin's time.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think he's Colombian, but he played in the Ecuadorian league, something like that. Anyway, yeah, I get it. So regarding their roles, I was asking this question of the roles of the management in terms of, let's say, bringing players over. I was asking more because we always had this debate when there was like an underwhelming transfer. Who is to blame? Is it Rami Bensebaini? Was it, let's say, Edin Terzic who insisted that we get him, or was it just Kel being boring Kel? Or what happened there? So we constantly have this debate. I think the debate carries on. So.
And it's also a debate that is never going to be resolved because nobody really knows how these things work. But I will say that I am a fan of Rami Bensebaini. So there's that.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a question from Christian, who lives in Germany, by the way. So he's asking you, he's saying, we know that now that during Jurgen Klopp's time, transfers were only made when all three big voices in the club agreed. So do you know if there's still such an agreement right now?
First of all, I'm not sure that was actually the case. Obviously, in broad strokes, those three voices being Zorc, Watzke, and Klopp, they had to agree. But I'm sure that at times it was more of a 2-versus-1 situation. For example, when they signed Ciro Immobile as the new starting striker, that was a Jurgen Klopp transfer. That was one where the blame could squarely be laid at Jurgen Klopp's feet because he wanted to get his warrior, as he called Immobile back in the day. These days, it certainly depends on the level of investment. For example, if they pay 30 million euros for Joe Bellingham, you can be very sure that everyone at the club agrees that is a prudent investment. Whereas signing Daniel Svensson on loan from Nordsjælland with a view to buy him in the summer, if he works out, that's presumably something where, for example, Sebastian Kehl as the sporting director, maybe in conjunction with the coach. Obviously, they changed coaches around that time, so Niko Kovac couldn't have been involved in that. But smaller transfers, I'm pretty sure, don't need the stamp of approval and everybody's excited consent. Obviously, if one of the levels of management, let's say, feels strongly in a negative way about a transfer, it's probably not going to happen, but I'm not sure there's a sit-down between, let's say, Ricken, Kehl, and now Kovac, and they all have to agree on paper and give their stamp of approval. I'm not sure that works out like that.
Yeah, I see. So most likely, for like a few million euros, Kale has like a credit card he can use without the approval of his bosses, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's surely going to involve everyone, but it's I'm guessing it's not like there's a big discussion about when they signed Aaron Anselmino on loan from Chelsea when they had a centre back shortage. I'm sure it's not like something that needs a large discussion and an emergency meeting of all levels in the club, because that's just not warranted, and it's also not good for business because obviously sometimes you need to make swift decisions.
Yeah. So I only have 2 more questions for you. If you still have a bit of time, maybe we can stay a bit longer, like for 15 more minutes, something like that.
No problem.
So I'm gonna ask the people watching us live if they have any questions. Maybe they can drop a few of them, and we'll try to maybe take 1 or 2 of them. Meanwhile, I'm gonna address my 2 questions. So one of them was about the way you feel about the, let's say, globalization of Borussia Dortmund. So they try to cater a little bit more to international fan scene in the past, let's say, 10 years, right after the big success that the club has had under Jurgen Klopp, mainly. So does this change the DNA of the club in any way? How do you feel about this as a German fan of Borussia Dortmund? And how do you think that the German fans of Borussia Dortmund living in Dortmund feel about this shift of their club to the international fan scene?
I don't know that there are strong feelings about this, because it's not coming at the detriment of the local fans for the most part. I think the only times when people are a bit annoyed is when Dortmund go on a preseason trip to the US or Asia and don't play, the friendly match against the 6th division side locally, where everyone can go and have a beer and a bratwurst during the game. But I think most people probably view it as a net positive, that their club is being watched by more people, enjoyed by more people, because obviously if you're a genuine fan of Borussia Dortmund, it's not only about what happens on the pitch, but also the values that are transported and the camaraderie and the identification. And I personally have never felt like Dortmund belongs to, or the Borussia Dortmund belongs to me in any way, because I'm from Germany and I'm lucky that my father basically turned me into a Borussia Dortmund fan before I even was able to speak or formulate my own thoughts. It was just, I was always a Borussia Dortmund fan, and I was lucky in that regard, but I have never had the feeling that I was special because of that. If someone gets up at 6 in the morning at the west or on the west coast of the United States to watch Borussia Dortmund play Heidenheim in the Bundesliga, then to me that's admirable, because I wouldn't get up at 6 in the morning to watch Dortmund. And I think it's a great thing that the internet has made it possible for people to follow clubs from all around the world, basically, and find community in it as well. I mean, we are on an English language podcast about Borussia Dortmund. You are now also an English language podcast, because we are doing this episode in English. Like, I think it's great. I don't see any negatives really. So I'm also happy. We talked before we started recording this episode also that it's easier for you guys now to become members of the club, to have stuff from the fan shop shipped to you. I'm sure a lot of international fans are only able to watch games live in person, maybe once or twice a year, because they are a part of a fan club. So I think all of it is great.
Yeah, I agree. And my last question would be about, so actually one of our veteran members, Marius, asked me to maybe talk to you a little bit about this. What do you think about Borussia Dortmund failing to, let's say, grow and promote a first team player coming from the youth academy? So Borussia Dortmund is kind of winning the junior leagues year after year, I believe, on the regional level, but they fail to produce like a big talent. So is it a Borussia Dortmund problem, or do you think maybe it's a German football problem because there's not a lot of huge talent coming up in the past 5 years or something like that?
I mean, you can always only work with what you have, and if you don't have, the talented players to make it at Borussia Dortmund, then that isn't necessarily down to anything you have done. But I think the club have basically told us themselves that they aren't happy with what they are doing at the youth level, because they made a fairly dramatic shift this year or this season when they let go of Mike Tulberg. He was obviously the under 23 coach for a few weeks before he went to, where is he now? In Denmark, I think. And they signed Felix Hirschnagel as the new under 19 head coach. Obviously, Thomas Broich is now the head of the academy. He's not actually the head of the academy. I think he's head of the youth development. Again, titles don't necessarily reflect what they actually do. But he's basically the big picture guy, I suppose. And Paul Schaffran is actually head of the academy. And they've moved away from the idea that winning trophies at the youth level is the most important thing, and moved more towards, individual development of talented players. I think we can see with the likes of Moussa Kaba, Samuel Inacio, Matisse Albert, they've all already graduated from the under 19s to the under 23s. And in case of Inacio and Albert, they've already been part of the first team squad, and Kaba as well, because he was against Frankfurt. Now Luca Reggiani is making his first steps at the first team. They have identified that they maybe didn't put enough value in developing players individually over the last few years, and are now trying to rectify that. And having watched the under 19 somewhat extensively this season in person here in Dortmund, I can tell you that they have a number of exciting talents. So I would be very surprised if, for example, Matisse Albert, I think he's ready right now to play Bundesliga football. Maybe not for Dortmund, maybe for a smaller side, but he could definitely do a job as well for Niko Kovac's team. I'm not so sure necessarily about Samuel Inacio, just because at the under 19 games that I went to, he didn't really do much, but obviously they think highly of him. And we've now seen Luca Reggiani make a very strong first impression, I would say, in his first 3 games. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that 5 years from now the question would probably not be put to me in the same way.
Yeah. So Marius, who I talked about, asking me to talk to you about this topic, also left us a comment here. What do you think about this sudden change of direction towards very young players? I mean, can we speak about a change of direction? Marius is mentioning that 2 summer transfers will be added to the 5 players promoted from the youth academy recently.
I don't think it's much of a change. I think they are always trying to sign these young guys, and sometimes it doesn't work out, because obviously, like 5-10 years ago, Borussia Dortmund was the address in Europe for a 17-year-old from anywhere, basically, who wanted to develop quickly, get game time at a high level, and then move on towards, greener pastures. Now every club signs these guys. Like Real Madrid are hoarding talents. Barcelona obviously mostly developed them themselves. And I think for, maybe 2 or 3 years, Dortmund just didn't get it done. And now they did get it done with Lerma and Kauer-Pratsch. But I don't think it constitutes much of a change. Again, these are long-term plays. Obviously, there's a level of investment, which suggests that they also have some short-term role in mind, but it's for further down the line. And as it pertains to the 5 players promoted from the academy, that's also down to the necessity of them, aging. Like, you can only play at the under 17, under 18, 19, and then under 23 level for so long. So if players are proving themselves to be too good to still play against 18-year-old kids from Holstein Kiel or some smaller clubs even than that, then it only makes sense to promote them to more senior teams. And at some point you need to see whether they will sink or swim, and that's also something that I guess for us fans is really exciting, because I agree that there's probably nothing better than seeing someone make his first steps at the team and then thinking back like 5 years later, remember when this guy made his debut and now he's a superstar. Like that's probably everyone's dream when they are kids, because they want it to be themselves, and then it's also something very special as a fan.
Yeah. So I'm displaying Catalin's question, but I don't think we need to address it because I believe we already have. So he's asking about Niko Kovac's playing style, because if we're judging football, it's not very spectacular, but we do have results. So I believe we've talked about this in the first half of the podcast. Catalin, maybe you can rewind, and right after the talk about the potential title race against Bayern Munich, we pretty much addressed this question. And we also spoke a little bit about Nico Schlotterbeck's contract, but Christian is asking you for like a prediction. He's asking what are the chances that he actually signs the contract extension.
Do you want a percentage?
Well, you're German, so yeah.
Right now, 85%.
Okay, cool. And I think, let me just double check if I've missed something. No, I think we're pretty much good. I have one remaining question for you. So I'm wondering, what do you think of Christian Chivu as a football player and then as a coach right now, seeing as you're a big Inter Milano fan as well?
Christian Chivu, the player, I don't have many memories outside of him wearing the protective hat after his head injury. I know he was a left-sided defender, left back later in his career when everyone played with four-man defenses, and he scored quite a few goals, if memory serves. But I don't really have too many recollections outside of the Champions League run under Jose Mourinho when they eliminated Barca in the semifinals and then beat Bayern, which obviously was for a number of reasons very enjoyable for us Dortmund fans, I think. As Christian Chivu, the head coach, I was once again very skeptical because I think he had 13 games of Serie A experience at Parma from last season when he was made the head coach of Inter after Simone Inzaghi, who had an incredible run as the head coach of Inter. And then the first few weeks of Chivu's in charge weren't that great. I think there were a couple of wobbly results, and I was stupid enough to make the prediction that he might be sacked before Christmas. Obviously, that hasn't been the case. They've turned things around quite a bit. They are now 7 points ahead in Serie A, so the title race is even more of an open and shut case than in Germany, I suppose. But then, they have this issue against big teams. They obviously beat Juventus last week or this weekend, but under somewhat controversial circumstances because there was a sending off for Kalulu, which was a horrendous, crazy decision. And then in the Champions League, they now lost 3-1 away to Bodo Glimt. But I think that result has kind of no value because big teams away in Norway with this crazy, weird artificial pitch, they've beaten Man City there, they've beaten Roma there, they've now beaten Inter Milan there. So I'm still fairly confident that in San Siro they might be able to turn it around.
I see. Yeah, I agree. For us, I mean, he's like a big reason of pride, but I'm thinking maybe Inter have done with Chivu something similar to what Borussia Dortmund tried to do with Nuri Sahin, except the fact that Chivu was allowed to coach the Primavera side for a few years, so he knew the DNA of the club very well, also from a coaching side, and to get very familiar with his role. Then he actually gained it's true, just a little bit of experience in Serie A with Parma, but then made this jump to coaching a big team with big expectations.
And I would also say that he has more relevant playing experience because he was at more big clubs than just Inter, whereas Nuri Sahin, obviously he spent some time at Real Madrid and Liverpool, but he basically didn't play at either of those spots. And he's also just older. I think that sometimes we are looking for the next, I don't know, Xabi Alonso or Julian Nagelsmann and promote these guys too early. I think Nuri Sahin is... he was just maybe 3 or 4 years too young for this kind of job, whereas Christian Kivu, as you already mentioned, he earned his spurs at the youth level and then got some experience at Parma, and I think he's benefiting from both of those things. And I think also what I didn't really appreciate, but because I didn't know, I think he has the right kind of personality because he seems very calm, even keel, doesn't get too emotional when things are going wrong or when they are going right. And I think that's something that, especially for Inter, who were coached by Antonio Conte, who's a volcano on the sideline, and also Simone Inzaghi, who's very emotional. I think it was a good contrast for them to get someone who's more relaxed, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. He's pretty level-headed. I mean, when scoring goals, of course, we see him very excited, but generally he's rational and level-headed, and he's the type of guy that I would say does things the right way. I mean, he follows the right steps. He doesn't cut corners in order to, let's say, advance professionally. So I think he did his job in learning what coaching means the proper way, sticking around a big club, but at a lower level beforehand. So yeah, we're in Romania. I mean, we don't really have a lot of highlights in terms of football players right now or football coaches. So he's one of the few that we can be happy with and yeah, proud of. Yeah, so maybe just getting back to Dortmund before we end, I just have two predictions to ask from your side. First, regarding Atalanta, are you confident that we'll get past them in Champions League?
Yes, I think as we talked about earlier in the show, I think Atalanta have so much to play for in Italy that I don't know how much effort they put into the return leg. Obviously, if they score an early goal, then maybe things turn out differently. But I'm thinking it's going to be like a 1-1 draw or something like that, and Dortmund advance to the next round.
Okay, and the second prediction would be for Bundesliga. So we have two big matches coming up. I'm not going to ask for scores, but I'm asking you if you think we're going to be able to get 3 points out of the next two Bundesliga matches against Leipzig and Bayern Munich.
I mean, honestly, if they are going to win one of those games, I would say the Bayern game is more likely, just because I think Bayern are a better matchup for them. Leipzig, they seem to have problems against Leipzig, especially away from home over the last few years, whereas against Bayern in Dortmund, those were always very competitive games, if nothing else. So I'm going to end on a positive note and say, yes, they will win one of those two games at least.
Great, thanks. So I actually predicted that we're going to get 2 points out of this, but I'm curious to see. So thanks a lot for joining us, for your insights. And if there's anything you want to end on, feel free to do so.
I have nothing to plug, so I'm just going to end on Her BVB.
That's perfect. Then I'm going to plug the yellowwallpod. So I recommend this podcast to our community because most of us are English speakers. So it's a quality podcast, and I think it's the best way to spend the day before match day, finding out more about Borussia Dortmund and getting predictions from you guys. So on that note, I hope we'll speak again at some point. So you're always welcome to join us. So thanks again for your insights, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.